drinking craft beer, having fun, and talking sports in the state of Michigan. You're listening to State of My Sports.
So we did want to talk a little bit of college football here. So we're what? Is it 5 weeks in? I think 5 weeks.
Yep.
Learning a lot about the way that the top 25 is laying out. I don't know when the playoff rankings start. I don't really buy a whole lot into the AP top 25 because it never seems to go the way that they say. But what I did was I pulled up episode 170's top 25. That was the first time we talked college football. It was the first time we brought up the top 25. So I have the AP top 25 here. And I just thought it was interesting to see the teams that have fallen completely out of the rankings is where I want to start. And then we'll talk about teams that have jumped up. But I want to start with the teams that have fallen out and kind of the bad here. So Notre Dame went in as the 5th ranked team in the country. They're 2-2 now. Completely out of the top 25. Obviously, with the loss to Marshall, you have the loss to Ohio State, but they also haven't looked good in other wins. Texas A&M, 3-2 overall. They lost to App State, which is just laughable again. But I mean, I forget who else they lost to. I think I have it later on, but Mississippi State. They lost to Mississippi. Got blown out by Mississippi State, which is why they're out of it. So they went from 6 to out. Oklahoma. I'm not surprised by this one. They're now not ranked. They were 9th. Baylor, interesting, not ranked at 3-2. Then right here, 15 through 19, Michigan State, Miami, Pittsburgh, Wisconsin, Arkansas, all not ranked. Michigan State and Miami at 2-3. Michigan State at 2-3, Miami at 2-2, Wisconsin at 2-3, and then Pitt and Arkansas at 3-2. All dropped out, and then obviously Houston started at 24, not ranked either. Which one's the most surprising faller to you out of those? And it can be mine.
Surprising.
Yeah.
I think the most surprising is probably Texas A&M.
Yeah.
But one team that I kind of had on my radar is maybe having an above-average year was Baylor.
Okay.
I thought they were going to take over, that what is that, the Big 12?
Yeah, I don't remember.
Whatever that conference is called anymore. But, man, I thought Miami was going to be in it, too, bringing in Cristobal, right?
Yeah.
Mario
people
Cristobal.
were talking highly about them, for sure.
But equally, I don't know, Wisconsin. For me, it's probably Texas A&M, but Baylor is a close second for me. Yeah,
so Baylor lost to BYU, who's still in the top 25, doing pretty good. I forget where they're at right now. They are 16, and they also lost to Oklahoma State, who's all the way up to number 7. Those are their 2 losses, so it's not that bad, but they also only won 31-24 to Iowa State. Texas State, they obviously smoked them. Albany, they smoked them. So that's an interesting one, the Baylor one, because those aren't bad losses. So it is kind of surprising that they've dropped them completely out, especially if you thought highly of them heading into the season. But the biggest one for me was the Texas A&M. Obviously, the loss to App State, but the getting smoked by Mississippi State was the one that was just like, all right, that's why.
Especially after the Jimbo and Nick Saban feud that went on there for a little bit. It's like, all right, come on, I thought Texas A&M was like a clear-cut favorite to at least be a borderline playoff team. I figured
their recruiting classes have been high the last couple of years. Everybody's talking about that. They're sitting now at 3-2 with Alabama on deck, Ole Miss at the end of October. Even with those 2 losses, if Jimbo can play to the number 6 ranking they started, I mean they can find their way back in. There's some other decent games in there that can kind of make some noise. But man, what Nick Saban could do to them this weekend could be a massacre. But Bryce Young might be out, like all that question. Like that's interesting. Like that one's a very interesting game because Texas A&M has the talent to do it.
Yeah.
But it's not all executing. So could they pull a Texas and kind of keep it close and you know what I mean? That's going to
sneak one out. I mean, it's obviously their biggest game on the schedule when the season started, but it's the only game on their schedule for anything hanging over the end of the year.
Yeah, would you say that Texas A&M is the most likely to find their way back into, I don't want to say playoff contention, obviously with 32 losses, and that's not going to happen, but like get back up into the top 20 or is that saying a little too much there? Because I looked at it as the most likely team to jump back up because I do think they could shock either Ole Miss or Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, imagine they win out, and they're a 2-loss team.
Which Trapp was big on that, right? Didn't he keep saying that, like they were going to keep winning out or something?
Yeah, I don't
feel like he said that. I don't
Probably
know.
has a boot on the line.
Probably.
Yeah, probably Texas A&M. I know Notre Dame still got a pretty strong schedule ahead of them. I couldn't tell you about those other teams between 15 and 19.
Another one that I was going to keep an eye on was Arkansas, who started at only 19, so it wasn't like highly ranked or whatever. But they have Mississippi State this week, BYU, who's 16 next week, and Ole Miss later on. Those are a couple games right there that's like, man, that can erase the 2-point loss to A&M that they already did. They also got blown out by Alabama, but, I mean, that happens.
Most teams do.
They all do, exactly. So I think you take care of business against Mississippi State, who I think is a fraud, BYU, who's interesting, but then, Ole Miss, it's all possible. So.
Yeah, those are big, like, strength of schedule games that can boost the resume, and launch you back up. It'll be interesting, the SEC could have a bunch of teams there with 2 losses, and unless one of them goes undefeated, there might be a handful of teams at the top of that ranking at the end of the season.
So on the other side of the spectrum, I do have the current AP top 25. You got Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. No shock there. Michigan up from 8 to 4 now, so they're up 4 spots. USC is up 8 spots to 6 based on where they originally started. Oklahoma State up 5 from where they started. A couple of interesting teams here. Tennessee, who was not rated. Penn State, who is not rated, they're at 8 and 10 respectively. So 2 interesting teams, 2 maybe fraudulent teams there. Kind of interesting to see what plays or like how those teams end up when they have tough schedules coming up. But you also have Ole Miss, who's up 12 from where they started. Kentucky up 7. It's just kind of fun to see, some teams that were not rated that are in the top 25: TCU, UCLA, Kansas, Kansas State, Washington, Syracuse, Mississippi State, and LSU. Very interesting for them to sneak in there because they look so bad. Was it week 1 that they lost?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember who they lost to, but it was not pretty. It was a close game, though, if I remember right. But it was like a team that they probably shouldn't lose to. I want to pull that up while I thinking about it because I thought I had that written down, but I want to make sure I get this right. Sorry.
So, I think with like the SEC and the top 25, you see a lot of teams just kind of swap with each other between Tennessee and Ole Miss, Kentucky. I mean, they were ranked in the top 25, but
yeah. So it was Florida State that they lost to. Sorry.
Florida State. Okay.
Yeah. They've also had some close wins, you know, so it's not.
They're not blowing the wheels off.
Yeah, do you have the most surprising riser out of those?
Oh, probably Tennessee.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you anything about their program or what they have for a team, but I don't know. I feel like they've just been kind of mediocre over the years, and a lot of coaching changes, program changes since that Peyton Manning days, right?
It feels a little fraudulent. I mean, they beat Ball State, Pitt. They only beat them by 7, which Pitt's not that great. Akron, they smoked them, obviously. And then Florida, they beat 38-33.
Okay.
I
guess they're
wasn't
like
that close. It was a late touchdown that made it that close.
Opponent. Yeah.
But Florida doesn't look that good after they started out all exciting. So,
I feel like there's a couple teams in here from the SEC that are just the beneficiary of an easy early schedule.
Yeah.
And maybe a couple other teams towards the top. I don't want to say everybody's had an easy schedule, but a lot of these undefeated teams have.
It is still so early.
Yeah.
It's like you're still just one conference game in, I think, so
yeah,
far.
and in one given week, you could have 4 of those teams flop places with 4 teams in the bottom 25.
Yeah,
20 through 25.
I think the most surprising to me is Penn State, especially after the 35-31 lucky win over Purdue.
And that was that was a crazy game too.
I sat and watched that game. I was like, all right, Penn State, I'm not worried about them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
They didn't deserve to win that game.
Look, they haven't gone out and beat anybody that's super exciting since then. But they're taking care of business. They're moving the ball. Their running game is actually really good and really surprising. I feel like I'm wrong about them, but also I'll keep an eye on it because it gets tough for them. You know, they got Michigan, Minnesota, and OSU 3 straight weeks after their bye. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're outside of the top 25 at that point. You know what I mean? Like, there's a really good chance that happens. Which teams do you think are going to make the playoffs right here, right now? You got Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan. I want to I always write that as Ohio State / Michigan because I feel like it has to be one or the other. But this feels like a year that it could be both.
Potentially.
And wouldn't that be crazy?
Obviously, this AP is telling you that if the season ended now, those are the 4 teams in. But if you were to take away the rankings and just ask national writers what 4 teams are in, they seem to be the 4 favorites in most conversations. So, yeah, I mean, you got USC, Clemson, and Oklahoma State in there. That could really stir things up.
Yeah, and Clemson's road's looking easier and easier, really, by the time we get through this. I mean,
yeah, and they haven't really done too much that's that pretty either. They've had some nail-biter
got very
wins.
lucky against Wake Forest.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think locks for sure are Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. I'd have to give Michigan the lead over Clemson and USC right now.
Yeah. Just because of last year, I think that needs to play a role in it.
Yeah,
personally.
Absolutely. And that's recency bias too on my part. But another surprising team for me is Kansas. I've heard a lot of people talking about them too. I guess they got a pretty decent quarterback down there. But then also UCLA, Matt Charbonnet.
He's good, man.
Is still running the ball over there.
And what, eighth year?
Yeah, they're calling him an NFL caliber running back. And it's just like, man, he's already used up his shelf life.
Yeah, for real. He's almost 30, I think.
Yeah, whoever snags him. But man, look out for UCLA. I don't know. I just caught glimpses of that Washington game, and
they look pretty good.
Seem to be back and forth. They got a confident quarterback. I don't know if they got what it takes to hang with the big dogs, but. I'd like to have Michigan. I'd like there to be 2 Big Ten, 2 SEC teams in there in the Final Four.
And UCLA, we're going to learn a lot about them the next 2 weeks. They play Utah and then Oregon.
Yeah.
So those are huge. You got UCLA, their second to last game of the year. So if they're legit, we'll learn that.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't put money on it just because of that daunting of a schedule, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, which one's your biggest fraud that's in the top 10 currently?
Biggest fraud.
Because I have a couple. I think Ole Miss is one of those teams that's like, yeah, they're really good, really exciting, but then
in the top,
it'll always hit them.
Top 10. I didn't see that you snuck that in there. I was looking down the list a little bit. I really wanted to throw out Syracuse.
Oh yeah.
But only because they're undefeated, and I think they're a basketball school. Yeah, top 10. Who? I'm kind of torn. I'm kind of torn between like Penn State and Tennessee.
Yeah, I think that's exactly who I would say. Just because, so Tennessee they have tight wins against Pitt and Florida, who are learning aren't very good. They have LSU this week, who I think is personally a fraud, so it won't change my perspective on Tennessee if they go take care of business at LSU. But then you have Alabama, Kentucky, and Georgia all on the upcoming schedule. Could see them falling hard. You know what I mean? That's if they go to Death Valley and win.
Yeah.
So that's never easy. So that's one. Penn State also, they just don't have a good-looking win, really. And they've looked vulnerable. They looked vulnerable against Central Michigan outside. I mean, they were playing in the rain, and that was ugly. Hard for anybody to do, but they pulled away late, and they take care of business, so I can't really fault them for it. But we'll learn a lot about both of those teams here soon, and that's what I really like about just college football in general. And I kind of brought this up earlier, but it's like I see Alabama and Georgia as head and shoulders. I still believe are better than everybody. Ohio State has looked good, not great, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I would put Michigan in that same category, Clemson in that category. That's kind of where I got the 2, the 3, and then kind of everybody else. And that might be unfair for USC. I feel like I got to see it to believe it against a real team. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's all like brand and new coach. I feel like hype is what got them all the way up to 6. I would probably put Oklahoma State ahead of them.
I think that's fair.
And maybe Ole Miss.
Okay.
And kind of sneak USC into the middle of the undefeated pack.
It feels like USC's defense is not nearly good enough to truly contend.
Yeah, I feel
they're
like
eventually going to get caught with their pants down in one of these games.
And
you know what I mean?
Yeah, they would be completely exposed to Alabama or Ohio State. I feel like,
exposed
and
with
maybe
their pants
Michigan.
down too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, luckily we get to see them in the Big Ten in the next couple of years, so we'll
that's
see
a good point.
See what the hype's all about.
For sure.